Hello, welcome to my YouTube channel and this review of Rings of Power episode 4. Yes, it's very late. Yes, it's about a week late, and that's fine. I'm excited to share my thoughts with whoever is out there listening. So thanks for tuning in. Before we get started, check on the links down in the description below to check out some of my other work outside of what I do on YouTube here. Which is mainly composing music and original scores and stuff like that. So check out the links below, particularly SILMARILLION symphony.bandcamp.com. I write music inspired by Tolkien's First Age and other, you could call them apocryphal writings or just supplemental writings that are around it. Or in the case of the Silmarillion, it's really, really, really important to everything that goes on in the Legendarium. All right, so let's get into episode 4 of Rings of Power. I'm not going to go through chapter and verse of it or in a timeline fashion. I'm just going to sort of shoot from the hip. I watched most of this last week, like I'm assuming many of you did. I have not had a chance to go back and watch it in the last couple of days, and that's okay. So I'm going to go through a few things that I found memorable, and the unfortunate bit, and this is something that's sort of bothering me about the show in general, is that I'm not finding there's a lot that's really all that memorable about it. Anything that's particularly gripping or that really sticks in your head and as really meaningful or whatever. It's sort of just a general thought on it. But I will start, and I was thinking about this a couple of days ago. One thing I really believe that should be repeated here, repeated or just brought up at the first time I'll bring it up, is just how good you can see, and this is vis-a-vis Rings of Power, but just in general by way of comparison, just how good Peter Jackson, Fran Walsh, Philippa Boyens, all of them were at writing a screenplay based on the Lord of the Rings. And my respect level for them has actually gone up quite a bit. As you know, and many Tolkien fans have expressed their disdain for certain decisions and directions that have been made over just about every adaptation that you've had. And there are bits in the original trilogy that I didn't love or were different from the books or whatever, and the truth of the matter is it really felt pretty good and pretty on target for Tolkien. The Hobbit less so. I thought The Hobbit was, you probably really only had 2 movies worth of material there. Even if you wanted to do the Middle-earth geopolitics angle, it's like you really didn't need 3 movies for it. But anyway, you can still tell that these people really have a great sympathetic understanding of the source material. And I know with Rings of Power, that's been advertised that the people that are running it really care about it and they really know the material well. And for me, that's not coming through at all in the writing. The Easter eggs, some of the little bits that they've dropped here and there, those have been cool, but those don't make a cohesive narrative the way they're handling it right now. And so I'll get into what that brings into mind for me from episode 4, which is sort of right from the start. You have this, I would call it a direct allegory to what you might call our modern politics, with the elves are taking our jobs in Numenor, making Numenor great again, kind of a thing. And no matter what your position is on MAGA or populism, nationalism, what have you, globalism, I don't really care. What it's indicative of, from where I'm standing, is what the writers of the show have been listening to and ingesting intellectually probably for the last 5 years. And so that whole scene with the guild master guy and then Farazan, It's completely hollow. And that kind of importing of that kind of a direct allegory into Tolkien is horrifying. And it just isn't that good. It just stunk. That scene was horrible. And I know they're setting up towards something with Pharazôn, Kingsmen versus the Faithful in Numenor, and so that's cool. Like, they have to do that somehow. That is possibly the worst bit of writing for something like that I've ever seen. And it didn't need to be that way. So you could have done that in a much different way. I hate to be so negative about what somebody's writing, but that just it wasn't close, and there's no reason to go that way. That just tells me you're just really, what you're doing is this Tolkien thing is your job, and then what you're ingesting the rest of the time intellectually is this absolute garbage. Whether you call it accurate garbage or whatnot, I don't really care. It's garbage narrative talking point stuff, and whether you're on the right or the left of the immigration issue. By the way, I'm an immigrant to the United States, so like I do have something to say about that, but that's not for here, and I don't really care that much. But I thought that was really shockingly obvious what they were trying to say, and it's like, that is bad. And by the way, just for the way that the whatever the show is called is moving, is so bad. To throw that in there makes almost no sense to me. It's like, you're talking about one elf, and yeah, her companion broke your buddy's hand, sure, but give him a compound fracture of his left ulna, or what have you. But that it just didn't make any sense to me, and putting that in there doesn't make any sense. I don't see what that really accomplishes either in terms of the story. It's like the elves are taking our jobs. I'm like, what? Like, there's other ways to demonstrate the way that men would go away from one serving the Valar or serving the elves or being allied loosely or whatever. There are many other ways you could do that without resorting to that kind of dreadful rhetoric. Anyway, easily my biggest issue with episode 4 was that. And it is descending into parody, quite frankly. It's just so not even close. And then you've got, in the rest of it, you've Galadriel wanting to speak to whoever's in charge. And she has to meet her goals, which is she's trying to get back to Middle-earth and warn people that Sauron is back. That's all well and good. Again, she makes herself supremely unlikable in the process. She's not a character I'm particularly sympathizing with, and anything that they built on, which was a little bit in episode 3 with going to the House of Lore with Elendil, they didn't build on in episode 4. They just made her somebody that just keeps asking to talk to whoever's in charge, and then she insults Muriel, and Muriel throws her in jail, which was kind of hilarious, because she had that coming. And by the end she gets her way, which is extraordinarily confusing the way they did it. But anyway, yeah, the less said about that, the better. I'm really, at this point, like, we're halfway through season 1, and I'm still asking the question, where are we going? It seems all roads are leading to the Southlands, and that's fine. Yeah, don't know that I would have done it that way, but that's okay. But I guess there's a direction they're going, and we were spared some of the Harfoot stuff in the last episode, which is which is fine. I've not found them to be adding that much to the show in general, and the general palette of the show. It's just not really saying very much. Elendil getting kicked out of the Navy is just kind of okay, like, I guess. Now he's going to Middle Earth as a soldier, which is cool. That'll be what it is. That's by the end. We've got that, but like, it's hard to see where this thing is really going, and if it's going to get somewhere substantive. Like, eventually, you would think you're telling the story of what, the last 500 years of the Second Age, or thereabouts. And I only infer that because Elendil is whatever age he is here, maybe in his 80s. So maybe he's got another 400 years left or something. Elros lived 500 years, so, the Numenorians don't necessarily live forever, but they live longer than a regular man would. And off we go, I guess. Like, I guess we end with the Battle of the Last Alliance, right? So we all kind of know where this is going. What I'm surprised with is not that Amazon did their own thing. That much is obvious, that it had to be done, and they had to take directions. They were always going to take directions that were going to tick people off, and Tolkien purists weren't always going to be totally happy with it. Like, I'm not, but I'm also not a purist in terms of this. But it would seem that the actual grasp of the material has eluded some or all of the production team, which might be a little bit cruel. Or whoever's writing this is like, how do you write like a goofy Americanized, the immigrants are taking our jobs trope into Middle Earth? Like, that's beyond it to me. Having read Tolkien and then doing that doesn't make much sense to me. Like, that's either you didn't read Tolkien, or you did and you just decided you wanted to do something better. But unfortunately, what's being served up is definitely not better than Tolkien. What are some other plot points we can talk about here? You've got, so Galadriel's going back to Middle Earth. The scene where she dummies 5 Numenorian guards was kind of interesting. Again, I think I'd love to see Galadriel at the proper height. It's a sticky little detail, but it's an easy one. You could have gotten it right. And there's nothing wrong with the fact that Morfydd Clark is, not 6'4". It's nothing wrong with that at all. It's just she's usually the shortest person in every scene that she's in. And Galadriel is depicted by Tolkien as being ridiculously tall, even for an elf. And elves average around 6'4". So make of that what you will. You got the stuff going on in the Southlands. Bronwyn's leading her people away from the thing. You have Adar, which let's speculate on that for a little bit. Some people have said, oh, well, maybe he's Maglor. I'm like, I really hope not. Maybe he's Meglin from the Fall of Gondolin. Well, Meglin got killed by Tur. I will say that Adar's face looks like it has been partially burned. So they're going to explain some of the emaciation there. Some of it was interesting talking with Arundir. It's like, where were you born? Oh, I was born in Beleriand. I'm like, all right, cool. Like, let's go. Let's dig into that. And then they moved away from it. I was like, come on, guys, stay here for a second. This is kind of interesting. And then they moved away from it. And that's talking about where Arundir is from, right? But would have been interesting to know where Adar was from. Who gives his little diatribe. He's like, you've been told many lies. And they're so amazing and so believed that even the trees and rocks believe them at this point. Which is an interesting thing. So we know that this elf is definitely not serving the Valar, and if he's serving a Valar, it's definitely not Manwë. It's more like serving Morgoth or perhaps Sauron. So I certainly hope that he's not any of the Noldor that we know from the first age. Which all the ones that I've seen stuff about maybe one of Galadriel's long lost brothers. Okay, cool. Maglor, that would just be heartbreaking, honestly. I think you just leave him out of it. If out of this, I'd leave him out of it. Meglin, you could see it, but he's dead. And if he is Meglin, he better have a massive fracture, and scarring along his arms, because Tuor did him in the Fall of Gondolin pretty good. So if you wanted to go that way, I suppose you could. So I wonder where that's going to go in the next episode. I'm hoping it's going to be somewhat of a resolution, not a... We have these little clues and little questions here and here and here and here, and the resolution to all of those things is kind of small and disappointing, or barely anything. That's kind of unfortunate. So we can go from that. The other thing in there with Adar was the orcs and his relationship to them. Now, I don't have a problem with an elf at all having a sense of feeling bad for orcs or whatever, because they're like these jacked up children that used to be elves, and now they're these awful, hateful creatures. But so that's fine. If we set that aside, you still have orcs giving another orc a funeral. And I've read the books several times. And the orcs hate one another. They're literally called the orcs of hate. Not just because the elves hate them, because they hate themselves. They eat each other. When one dies, they eat them. So this is very confusing. I know there's been talk about, the orcs are even on a little bit of a journey trying to have a life in Middle-earth or whatever. I'm like, that is completely misguided for how they're depicted, even though from, I think, a certain perspective, you could probably get there. But it doesn't help very much. Okay, so a few more points, and then I'll get out of here. We were talking about the orcs. Once again, the orcs hate everything and everyone, including themselves. So the depiction that we have with them doing a funeral after Adar mercy kills one of them for some reason, I don't know, was he in pain? I don't know. The humanization of the orcs is not something I don't think, or that I think will work. We can try it. It might work for another fantasy series, but I don't think it works for Tolkien very well. Because I don't know if he shows them as being redeemable at any point in the literature. It would, in the reading that I've done, it doesn't really show up. Even though it's pretty obvious their agency is pretty compromised, and Saruman, Morgoth, they all manipulate them to their ends. And of course they mess with biology itself. As you would understand it in Middle-earth, not human biology. We're not talking about that, but yeah, of course, there's a little bit more we can touch on. Of course, I'd love to know where this Numenor plotline is going, with Galadriel going back to Middle-earth and Miriel magically changing her mind after Galadriel's just kind of stomped her feet. And just been kind of mean the entire time, and dismissive and rude, and everything that the Numenorians kind of think that elves would be in this show. I'm very surprised. That's how they'd show it, with almost like how does Miriel come to the conclusion that she should just do this? So there's not a lot of exposition going on there, and I don't think I missed anything. So you've got that rolling there, but at least we're going back to Middle Earth. That's all right. So Halbrand. I'm going to go ahead and say Halbrand is not Sauron. It would be a massive, obvious irony if he was, given the fact that he rescues Galadriel for some reason off the Sundering Seas, after she decided to swim 300 miles. Again, you're an elf. You're probably a superb athlete. You saw the light of the trees. Sure, maybe not. You're still going to need some help there. But I don't believe Halbrand is going to be Sauron. I think he's going to be one of the 9 kings of men that get a ring at some point. I gotta think that that's soon in the show. Although, of course, I don't believe Sauron really shows up until the end. We don't even get to know who the stranger is until the end of the season. And I want to say Amazon may have even announced that you're not going to see Sauron until season 2, possibly later, given the compressed nature of the timeline that they're working with. For me, immediately, once you see Elendil, you're thinking, okay, so you've got the downfall of Numenor, you've got the War of the Last Alliance, you have the migration of the faithful from Numenor to Gondor and Arnor and Middle-earth proper, rather than Numenor, because Numenor gets destroyed, which I would anticipate may happen this season. I don't know how they're going to get there. But they're going to. They're going to get somewhere. They have to. They're already showing that with the wave that both Galadriel and Muriel have seen. Not sure what they're going to make of it right now, but we'll figure it out eventually. Maybe. I hope so. We're halfway through now, and it's about time to start seeing something. Maybe we speculate on Adar for a couple of minutes. One, I'm going to go ahead and say Adar also is not Sauron. Basically because the orcs hate his guts. They hate Sauron. They hate Saruman. They hate Morgoth. So Adar's not going to be Sauron. There's been plenty of speculation as to who he might be. Whether he's Meglin from the fall of Gondolin, whether he's Maglor, one of the sons of Fëanor, Agnor or Angrod. The one thing I found interesting about the character played by Joseph Mall, who I quite like, by the way, I enjoyed him in Merlin as well. But he's got Adar's got some burn, what looks like 3rd-degree burns or something that's marred his face. And so it would depict some kind of fire, so we'll see where it came from. Maybe he was part of Finrod's army in the First Age or something like that and decided, screw this, I'm out of here. I don't know. They showed the 3 stars on his armor, which I guess might indicate House of Fëanor somehow. I think they'd be better off just creating an entire new character rather than turning him into something else, which is sort of what seems to be what's going on, is that they've kept him his own thing, but maybe I'm wrong. The sympathy he shows for the orcs is strange, because I don't feel like Tolkien did, and certainly not humanizing them in any way. But there are some things that are coming up, I would say, in the grand scheme of the show, and there's some good opportunities to show some interesting values and so forth, and interesting lines from Tolkien that I think he shows. The grasping for power is one of those things that Tolkien does show. I would say not in a positive light most of the time. So we'll talk about Downfall of Numenor. Pharazôn takes Muriel as his wife, pretty much by force. as a political maneuver. I can't place right now. It's a little late where I am right now, but I can't place it if they end up having an error or something there, or if it's just purely a political move done by Farazan to gain more access and more power to Numenor and to, lead a fleet over to Valinor and get everybody killed. Tolkien doesn't show that stuff positively. And I think the show, for what it's been going for, wanting to show women as being powerful, which is, I think, is a positive thing. This is a good opportunity to show that, and at least show some of the negative sides that a grasp for power might show. And you can show that through Farazan's character. You can show that probably through Halbrand's character, because I think there's going to be a turn in his character shortly. Right now, he just kind of seems like a douche. To be honest, yeah, he helped Galadriel out a little bit, but otherwise he's just sort of obnoxious and annoying, and with some quirky niceties here and there, like talking the queen down from throwing him right in a dungeon right from the minute they meet her. But I don't think either Halbrand or Adar Sauron, that wouldn't make much sense. And they're going to have to show some making of rings at some point, which I would hope is by the end of this season. But that's just speculation at this point. One thing you can look at in Tolkien, whenever you've got somebody grasping for power and they're doing it through marriage, it's kind of a trope. So Farazan and Miriel are actually cousins. And whenever Tolkien pulls this device out, it's never good. And he makes no bones about it. So this marriage for Miriel and Farazan is not something that she's down with. And he shows this in the Silmarillion as well, with Meglin and Idril. Although, it's a different situation, but always the fruits of that situation, sort of incestuous desire, ends up going very, very, very wrong. In the case of Numenor, it's going to lead to the downfall of Numenor. In the case of Meglin and Idril, Idril turns him down. She wants nothing to do with it because the Eldar don't marry that close in kin. And Meglin resents it. So when Idril marries Tur, he goes crazy and betrays Gondolin to Morgoth. It's not necessarily that simple, but to keep things quick and brief, we'll go with that. Of course, Meglin gets captured by orcs and threatened with torment, and he says, "Take me to your leader." And they do, and then he betrays all of Gondolin to Morgoth. By the way, Idril is Arendil's mom, Tur, his father. So these are all people related to Elrond, and they talk a little bit about Elrond and his daddy situation, shall we say, which was endearing in some ways. The Celebrimbor scene, I can't really make heads or tails of what they're trying to do with him right now. But I think that hopefully will be revealed shortly. Excuse me. Hopefully you're not too bored watching this. But anyway, yeah, the Elrond stuff in there, talking with Durin and so forth, they're probably hinting at the dwarves have found Durin's Bane at this point, all the way down there, and Father Durin is shutting it down so that the two dwarves have sort of a nice father-son moment there. Because, of course, Elrond is talking about Erendil. He's like, I wish I could see my father now, blah, blah, blah. And even that bit of dialogue, even though that was not terribly written, it's like there was a lot. It's like a missed opportunity almost. So it's in general. If I was to have to put the show down to one thing, it feels a little bit hollow right now, and they've not filled it in yet. And I'm hoping that what the writers and producers are thinking about the show, and as they've advertised to us, the fans, and anybody that's watching the show, is that we really, we love Tolkien, and we have a really good understanding of the books, and we want to understand the spirit of it and make sure that you're getting a good representation of that, even though we're doing our own thing with it. I hope that starts to shine through, because it's not quite coming through yet, and that's being generous. So I hope that starts moving in the right direction. Anyway, I'm going to wrap it up there. Take a look at the links down in the description below. The Silmarillion Symphony.bandcamp.com. Also, you can find me on Spotify. I'm Aaron Dunn. I'm a composer and musician. I write music about Middle Earth. So keep your eyes open for more Silmarillion Symphony related stuff this year, and I'll talk to you all soon. Thanks very much.